Ladies and gentlemen, in a world where two middle-aged white men have a podcast about their church, as
I
done.
thought you were gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome.
I could have done that too. Yeah, welcome to After Service, production of Open Door Community Church. Normally, our podcast is a reflection of the message that we heard on the most recent Sunday. We are currently in a series, however, where we are reflecting on a book called The Political Gospel. And I believe we're going to start chapter 2, but we could do some small talk before we get into that first. We've also already had 20 minutes of small talk before we ever hit recording, and not even small talk, kind of intense conversation before we got started.
Yeah, maybe we'll share some of that stuff someday.
Yeah, once we figured it all out.
Right.
So much.
I did figure a lot figured out on Sunday's sermon. So,
hey, I'm going to ask how. I have had a sinus headache. I've had a cold for a couple weeks now, but but this change, we had like high 70s a couple of days ago, and now it's like 60s, but it's wet and cloudy. Now I had this headache. How are you dealing with the change in weather?
not a problem. But I take good care of my sinuses. As most people don't know, but you do. A couple of years ago, I had sinus surgery because my constantly plugged, and so ever since then, I work really care. I do I have a whole routine. I do of drainage and everything else. I don't get sick as much, and I'm aware of that stuff. So no, I'm doing fine. But then again, but everybody in my household are not. So
do you have a neti pot?
There's something like it. There's better versions.
Right. Okay. All right. You guys can look that up on your own time. But and it's
what the doctor recommended. It's something like that, but there's a better version.
Yeah.
So
you mean instead of pouring a teacup down your nose?
Yes.
Or a teapot down your nose. Yeah. Anyway, look it up. Look up neti pot, and look up alternatives because there's more.
It really helps.
Yeah.
So, anyways, enough about my personal life.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be beautiful the next 10 days. It's after today, it's supposed to be sunny and 70s.
I got yard work I need to get done. So wait until I'm sure that it's going to be dry, and then I got some stuff I need to do. So other than that, I'm waiting for my boys to graduate on Thursday. Oh my goodness. So
your heart.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's what it is. Launching them into the world. Hopefully they fly. They will. They're good guys, but it's just, as I've said to many people, I'm very excited for them to leave for a lot of different reasons, including my house will be clean. At the same time, I will miss the mess because, it represents them.
Yeah. So. I completely understand. Yeah.
I know. All right. We should probably get into step 2. And Child, the Way of the Dove. I don't think that's a very good, accurate title, but my title was Contradictions. That's how I would say it.
Is it okay if we do a quick recap of chapter 1?
You want to do it, or you want me to do it?
Either one, mostly because Vanessa was saying, what's this book you guys are doing the podcast about again? Right. And it's like, okay, well, here's the underlying idea. However, we haven't touched really on, we've done foundational things, but we haven't really gotten to specific guidance yet.
And I don't know that he still has, but let me give you a little bit. I mean, the first thought that I had is that the early creed, suffered under Pontius Pilate, is presenting the gospel in a political context, which is true. And then he goes in and talks about the difference between the dove and the eagle. That Rome is the symbol of the eagle, which is power and dominance, but Jesus had the symbol of the dove come down, which has to do with peace. And so there's a contrast right there. He talks about his ethical teaching, loving your enemies, non-retaliation, peace, serving, not rebellion. So there's a different mode of operation. He talked about the tax thing in Mark 12, where, who should we pay taxes to? Should we pay the taxes to Caesar? And there's this trap between, do you want to support a bad regime and pay taxes, or do you want to rebel against it? And Jesus gives a clever.
This is chapter 2 you're talking about right now.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know you were providing a synopsis of 2. I was just recapping through chapter 1. What have we covered so far?
Never mind. Do you want?
Yeah, sure. I'm having a little trouble with my cloud reader.
No.
Yeah, my cloud reader keeps jumping ahead. So if you want to do that, I'm going to grab my tablet so I have something to read off of. Excuse me.
Christianity is both political, but it's also not partisan, in the sense that it political means that it has to, politics from a classical definition has to do with how are we as a society supposed to function. It does say a lot about how we as a society should function. But it's not partisan in the sense that it's not right or left. It's a third way. It's coming at it from the kingdom of God perspective, and so we need to see things differently. That what that requires, that on one hand, there's times to submit to government and to obey the laws. We are not terrorists. We're not insurrectionists. On the other hand, because we come from a different perspective, there's times we're called to be subversive and not follow the culture, or there is a place for civil disobedience, but we have to be very careful for that. So there's kind of this paradox between the two things. And we typically as Christians take we either need to be private and completely keep our faith to ourselves, or if we're not, we're going to be hyper partisan. Neither of those are good options. We need a different way of going about it. I think that's the basic idea.
That sounds good to me. Yeah. I brought up the table of contents for myself here. We are currently in part 1, which is called the political past. And I think and so today we're entering chapter 2, which would be the second of 3 chapters that discuss the political past. And I think that's really helpful in that laying this foundation of recontextualizing the politics of Christ and of the culture in which he lived. And then we get into political present, which will be in a couple of weeks, where we talk about today.
He's laying his theory of political theory, as it were, out in these first couple of chapters.
Yeah.
He arguing he came with a political message that a new nation is coming, the kingdom of God, and he's offering amnesty to rebels. But as we get into today, as he talk, and this to me was the best part of chapter 2, is when he's talking about this section about Jesus and Pilate, that his kingdom is not of this world. He's a king, but he's not a kingdom of this world. And what does all that mean? So
yeah, well, I think if you don't mind, one of the first things that stood out to me when he is talking, and you were doing a recap of the chapter, and I stopped you because I was looking for a recap of up to this point. But the idea where they were, asking about the Pharisees and the Herodians were asking him, which, who do you owe this to? Are you pro-empire or anti-empire? And basically the whole question they were asking Jesus in order to trap him was founded upon a false dichotomy, the idea that there are only 2 options. And Jesus said, but you haven't provided me. He didn't really say this, but effectively he's like, yeah, you gave me 2 options and neither one is the correct answer. And I think that's, to me, that's really helpful, because we live in a partisan culture that tells you that that is pressing, forcing false dichotomies upon you. Are you pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, right? If you choose one or the other, somebody's mad at you. And do you have to choose either one, or can you choose love? Can you choose God?
Hmm. Hmm. And you need to be either completely private with your faith, or you need to be pick a side,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
sides are binary. It's either you're conservative or liberal.
Right.
It's one of the two. And Jesus is like, wait a minute, there's a different way. And I think that's what the author's trying to get us to see. What's this different way?
Yeah. He does start out the chapter, as I'm looking at it, with the idea. They talk about the importance of the imagery of birds,
Mm-hmm.
and how they relate. And I don't know how much I really want to go into that, but
Find it,
what's that?
did I didn't personally.
Oh, you didn't find it helpful. I think it because he's taking the symbol of the eagle, which was a very powerful in Roman culture. We still have the symbol of the eagle in terms of its from a leadership perspective. The symbol of the eagle for leaders over time was implied power, and maybe an underlying warrior,
Dominance,
or right. I mean,
or all that sort of stuff.
and then Jesus has the dove, which is kind of
Doesn't
the,
make
well, it's I think what he was trying to say in that is that,
meaning it doesn't make sense to the world. It made sense to me.
oh, okay, yeah. Well, and I think it had a meaning then, but when you have that expectation, both from the Jewish community that's waiting on a Messiah, that it was going to be the Messiah was going to be an eagle, as it were,
Right.
and then the like Pontius Pilate's interpretation that the kingdom that Christ was going to rule over, similarly, was an eagle kingdom rather than a peaceful one.
Right. The only way you can have a kingdom is be an eagle.
Right, right. And I really appreciated that in this chapter the author is taking subversion and submissiveness and allowing us to understand that they're not contraindicative, that they can exist at the same time. In order to subvert something does not require you to be rebellious in a as a zealot is rebellious, right?
Right.
You can acknowledge Caesar, but you're doing so by first acknowledging that God has the authority over Caesar. So kind of like you talked about on Sunday, the idea that authority, and I understand a little bit more about where that was coming from in your message, the idea that in order that you can acknowledge somebody that you don't agree with is an authority by recognizing that the only reason they have any authority is because God allowed them to have it. I'm actually taking away the term God gave them the authority, because it's, I mean,
To lead providentially at the
yeah,
minimum.
yeah,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Whoever ends up being president next year, it's because that's who God is allowed to be be there. And whether or not it was done um, by whatever means, whether you agree with those means or not, or you think they're illegitimate or legitimate or whatever it is, they're still president and they still have legitimate power in that sense.
yeah. And not to
So,
spend too much time on that topic, because it was something on Sunday that I was struggling a bit with, to be honest with you. It's like, did God give them this authority? Because I think there's a little bit of like, if somebody that you like becomes president, you can say, well, God destined this to happen, or God made
right.
this happen. It's like God is allowing this to happen by not intervening. And the only reason this person has this power is because God allowed it to happen. So instead of going, my
Right.
guy won because God is on my side.
Like, oh, God got my president in there. Yay. Oh, but we don't give it the other way around. It's just, I don't know. But the point is all authority ultimately is rooted in God. And so therefore, Jesus is stating that on one hand, you need to honor that authority, even if you don't agree with it, because it's honoring the one who really does own it all, the God who created you.
Yeah.
That's the idea behind the coin, I think. I
I
think that's
think
what he's saying.
I think so. I think so. And that maybe the path to subversion is in rejecting the false dichotomy,
Yeah.
and rather than, this goes kind of what I've been talking about lately, is the idea of a culture that requires certainty where certainty isn't really required or appropriate. That when we, and I'm sure we'll get to this in the book at some point, when we are presented with the idea that you have to be one or the other, don't respond to, there's a lot of tension to respond in a specific way based on what you think people want to hear.
Right. Right. I had two other interesting thoughts. One is just a comment,
Okay.
and the other one is much more thoughtful. Well, actually, I have three. One is, what I find interesting is that Jesus had a political partisan, a zealot in his group, and that person didn't end up remaining a political devotee. I mean, that was not his thing, and Jesus didn't give into that. And we don't even really know what a zealot is. But I briefly looked at the definition. It was a political movement in the first century that was trying to incite people to rebel against Rome, and they were motivated both by religious and civil concerns. It's like, man, that sounds like some people in our politics today. Religious and civil reasons. It's like, okay, but Jesus didn't adopt that guy's perspective.
Yeah.
I think that's very noteworthy, and it's often overlooked. Do you have any comments on that? I'll just move on, because that was just a comment.
No, I think it's good. He did reference also the Maccabees, which,
right.
Growing up Catholic, that was part of the Bible, was the book of Maccabees, but it was this rebellion that was, trying to undermine the Roman leadership,
Mm-hmm.
and that definitely sets the kind of the Maccabees and the Zealots kind of set this framework of violent rebellion that
Right.
Jesus subverts,
And was certainly an option
Yeah.
for him, and he didn't take.
Yeah.
Especially considering, and I think we forget this, that was more than just an option. That was what was expected of him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's still today, if I understand right, one of the major reasons why many Jews don't believe in Jesus, because that's not what he did. He wasn't the political rebel that they wanted him to be. He didn't create an earthly kingdom. Okay, that's not the way it was. Instead, and he had this line, and I'm going to fill it out a little bit, but he had this little line that the cross should be the center of our political theology. I really like that phrase, because what it says to me is that on one hand, he's submitting to the authority of Rome. He allows Pilate to crucify him. But at the same time, it is that very submission that crowns him king and secures his rule and Rome's downfall. That very his actual submission is the very thing that it undoes the whole system, that makes him king. And I'm like, now that's an image that I can get behind.
Well, I'm trying to remember. It's not judo. Maybe it is judo. There's a martial art. Okay, yeah, that uses the power, let's say, or the energy of the other person, and then moves it, or just moves it away, right?
Yeah. or redirects it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It to
Yeah.
me, it here's Jesus doing judo, right? It's like you guys are putting all this effort in so that to avoid me, ascending to my throne, and
Mm-hmm.
in doing so, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you would have done nothing, right? It's not possible that Jesus wouldn't have been successful. So I'm going to say that, but there's definitely a distinct irony in that all those efforts
Absolutely.
only serve to fulfill all these
Right.
prophecies.
Including given in the even the cosmic sense of, it's Jesus's, being crucified that Satan ultimately is defeated. It's like it makes no sense that that should work, but it does in the way God does things.
Yeah.
Just does. So I had one more, but I could save that. Did you have other thoughts,
Okay,
things
no,
that you were?
keep going. I'm kind of flipping through here.
Okay,
Um,
to me, the best part of it, I mean, other than one line was amazing to me, um, because it puts other things in place in my brain. Was this whole discussion of Jesus before Pilate, um, and he made a interpretive observation that I'm like, oh, that's really true. And when Jesus said that my kingdom is not of this world, and it didn't. He still thought of him as a king because he crucified him as a king, but he somehow knew that something was different. And that phrase of is an interesting word because what it means is not location. It can, but it doesn't always mean location. So what Jesus is saying that his kingdom is not located in the physical world at the moment. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is of in the sense um, of uh, of source of his kingdom, the nature, the
yeah.
means by which king. And I thought, it's sort of like in the sense of bread is made of flour. It that's the substance of it. It's not the way the world works. It's not made up in that sense of those things. It's made up of something else. And I think that's to me that has a lot I need to think more about.
Yeah, and I especially appreciate the word nature in that sense that he subverted expectations in so many different ways, and so the idea of what a kingdom was, what it looked like, how it presented itself,
Very different.
very different. And you were talking on Sunday about paradigm shifts in the way we think about things, and that's what Jesus did. You know, you think about the ruts in a road, and I probably told this before. When it snows and then it freezes, it melts a little bit and then refreezes. You've got these ruts in the road. Yeah. Well, I'll keep talking while he lets the dog in. Um, but
There you go.
when you have these ruts in a road, we have this tendency in our brains and based on what culture has told us, we lock in to a certain way of thinking. And if we want to move out of that, then we're usually drawn right into another set of ruts. And it doesn't allow you to ponder what's in between. And
Intentionality and effort to go in between.
yeah, and boy, if you think about that way, and the way Jesus said, "I'm not this one or that one,
I'm
but
something else.
I'm something else, but I absolutely am." Right? I am
Right.
absolutely this, ascending to the throne of my kingdom. I am a king, and we're like, wait, what?
And that's a part of that is this idea that we want to separate secular and sacred. We want to separate um, um, religious from or spiritual from physical. And I think one of the things he's getting at is we shouldn't do that. That's a very American idea. The division there. It's a very Enlightenment idea
Yeah.
that's not necessarily in Scripture, because ultimately we do know from the Old Testament that in the New, that Jesus's reign will be quite literal, quite physical. It's just not being expressed that way at the moment.
Right. Well, and it also, I think, really speaks to the idea that our engagement in politics, which he hasn't gotten to yet, isn't because he does talk a little bit about the idea of the separation of religion from government. And
right.
In the same way he's talking about the coin, right? Are they counter to each other in that they don't mix, or is one innately need to be a part of the other? Or is there a way to have both, right? To be part of the government doesn't mean that you are inciting rebellion, as in we need to turn this country around. The only way to do that is to impose our will upon people through the power of politics and the government. Or I'm just not going to engage. There's no way to engage in that. We just need to stay completely out of it. And he's saying there's this place in the middle. And we haven't seen that yet in the book.
No, we haven't seen that. He's just laying the framework that, hopefully he'll get there. Hopefully this will all go make sense. I think it will. I'm anxious to get there.
You've already read it, so you know where we're going. I'm still just reading one chapter at a time, so I don't get ahead of myself. I
think what I was thinking about that as we were just ending, because I know we need to end here. So I feel like this podcast and this book is for people who are tired of that dichotomy. They kind of innately know we should be involved and we should be saying something, but we don't like this divisiveness. We don't like this anger, and we want to have a transcendent above a third way of engaging that's not like everything like what we're seeing today.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that? Does that resonate with you? It certainly does with me.
Oh, when you mentioned the book, that was my hope, right? In my mind, I don't want us to have to live in a false dichotomy. I really, and I feel the pressure on both sides. When I talk to people who are really progressive, and I share some things, I've had conversations where people get mad at me for not being progressive enough in my thinking, and then people who are mad at me for not being conservative enough, and it's like, well, I can't make either one of you happy, and that means that I really just have to do my best to understand what Christ is asking of me.
And I get it, and I don't have it as much as you do, I think, on a personal level, although I still do. But I definitely feel that tension as a pastor.
Yeah.
I saw a YouTube video today of these. The title was "Why don't pastors speak out about politics?" And I thought, well, man, I wonder if this is going to be a nuanced discussion. Oh no. All it was bashing them for not speaking out because they're afraid. That's not the issue. I am quite happy to speak the truth. It's how do you do this in a way that's not alienating the other? How do you really be faithful to? And I don't think it's the either option that we've been presented with. So we'll see.
Yeah, but it makes me think. Not only should we resist people forcing a false dichotomy upon us, but we should also resist forcing a false dichotomy on other people. You know, that's the tougher one, I think, because I feel that there's an innate judgment that I can have on topics that I feel strongly about. And to me, that's trying to control where I've not been asked to control.
I have one last thought, and I'll let you have the last one. But it's like, if the cross is our theology for how we introduce with politics, then expect to get crucified.
Ooh, let's just leave it there.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And as always, if you have questions, let us know. And hope to see you on Sunday.
Take care, folks.